When did you realize your family was using you? I was 17 when it hit me like a brick wall. For years, I thought I was the golden child. Mom and Dad would brag about their brilliant son to anyone who'd listen. Our boy's going places, Dad would say. Full ride to Stanford, pre-med track, he's gonna be our retirement plan. That last part always made me uncomfortable, but I figured it was just his way of joking around. The truth started unraveling during my senior year. I'd been accepted to Stanford with a full scholarship. Plus, I'd landed a research position that paid $2,000 a month. But instead of celebrating, my parents seemed stressed. We need to talk about your college expenses, Mom said one evening. What expenses? Everything's covered by the scholarship. Dad cleared his throat. Well, there are still costs. Living expenses, books, that sort of thing. The research job covers all that, I replied, confused. They exchanged a look I'd never seen before, something calculating and cold. Son, Dad said carefully, family takes care of family. We've sacrificed a lot to get you this far. That's when they laid it out. They wanted me to take out student loans anyway, maximum amounts. For the family emergency fund, Mom explained. Just in case something happens. My stomach dropped. You want me to take out loans I don't need? We raised you, fed you, put a roof over your head for 17 years. Dad's voice hardened. Time to give back. Over the next few weeks, the requests escalated. They wanted me to apply for credit cards using my Stanford acceptance letter. You'll have amazing credit as a pre-med student, Mom said, just until we get back on our feet. I started paying attention to things I'd ignored before. The expensive jewelry Mom wore while complaining about money. The new truck Dad bought while claiming we were broke. The way they'd suddenly become interested in my finances right after my acceptance letter arrived. Then I found the stack of bills hidden in Dad's desk drawer. Credit cards maxed out, mortgage payments months behind, and worst of all, a second mortgage they'd taken out on our house, using my future earning potential as collateral. They'd literally bet the house on my success. When I confronted them, Mom started crying. We knew you'd make it big, she sobbed. Doctors make millions. We just borrowed against your future a little early. What if I don't become a doctor? I asked. Dad's face went cold. You will. You don't have a choice anymore. That night, I heard them on the phone with someone, discussing payment schedules and interest rates. They were treating me like a business investment, not their son. The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. I called Stanford's financial aid office and explained the situation. The counselor, Mrs. Patterson, was shocked. Your parents are trying to force you into debt you don't need? She asked, her voice rising with disbelief. They've been planning this for years, I realized out loud. Every time they bragged about me becoming a doctor, they weren't proud. They were calculating future returns on their investment. She connected me with a legal aid clinic that specialized in family financial abuse. The intake coordinator, a sharp woman named Diana, had seen cases like mine before. Financial abuse within families is more common than people realize, she explained during our first meeting. Parents who see their children as future income streams rather than individuals with their own rights and autonomy. Within a week, I learned my parents had already forged my signature on 3 loan applications. They'd been intercepting my mail for months and had actually received approval for $47,000 in loans I'd never applied for. Worse, they'd used my social security number to open 4 different credit cards and had been making minimum payments to keep them active until I could take over the debt. The lawyer assigned to my case, David Kim, was blunt. This is systematic identity theft and fraud. They've been stealing your financial future to fund their current lifestyle, and they've been doing it methodically for at least 2 years based on these documents. He showed me a file thick with evidence. Bank statements, loan applications, credit reports, all in my name, all signed with a forged signature that was surprisingly close to my real one. They've been practicing, he said grimly. This signature has gotten better over time. They've been planning this extensively. I felt sick. My own parents had turned me into their personal ATM before I'd even graduated high school, and they'd been rehearsing the crime. When I got home that evening, they were waiting with celebration decorations and a cake that read, Future Dr. Mitchell, in blue frosting. Surprise! Mom yelled, her smile so wide it looked painful. We got approved for your loans. Time to celebrate our future doctor. Dad handed me a stack of papers, his hand trembling slightly with excitement. Just need your signature on a few things. Formality, really. Everything's already been approved. I looked at the documents. Student loans totaling $65,000, credit card applications for limits up to $15,000 each, even a car loan for a reliable vehicle for medical school that would cost $35,000. They'd planned every detail of my financial destruction. There was even a life insurance policy where they'd listed themselves as sole beneficiaries. At the bottom of the stack was a promissory note they'd drawn up themselves, stating that I agreed to provide them with $2,000 monthly family support payments starting upon graduation. I'm not signing any of this, I said quietly, setting the papers down like they were toxic. The room went silent. Dad's smile disappeared like someone had flipped a switch. Mom's eyes narrowed to slits. What did you say? I said no. I know what you've been doing. The forged signatures, the second mortgage, all of it. Mom's face crumpled, but not with sadness, with rage that seemed to come from somewhere deep and primal. You ungrateful little shit, she hissed, her voice venomous. We gave you everything. Private tutoring, test prep, college visits. Do you have any idea how much money we spent on you? Money you borrowed against my future without asking. I shot back, my voice stronger than I felt. We're your parents, Dad roared, his face turning red. We don't need to ask permission to make decisions about our investment. There it was, their investment, not their son. Investment? I repeated. Damn right, he said, stepping closer. 17 years of feeding you, clothing you, driving you to activities. You think that was free? You think we did that out of the goodness of our hearts? Mom jumped in, her voice getting higher and more shrill. We could have had vacations, a nicer house, new cars. Instead, we invested everything in you, and now it's time for our return. By stealing my identity and forcing me into debt, Dad stepped forward, his fists clenched. You'll sign those papers, or you can find somewhere else to live, tonight. And don't think about calling anyone for help. Everyone in this family knows the deal. What deal? The deal where you pay back what you owe us, Mom said coldly. Your uncle knows. Your grandparents know. Everyone's been counting on you to step up. That's when the full scope hit me. This wasn't just about my parents' debt. They'd involved the entire extended family in their scheme. Fine, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I will find somewhere else to live. The next few hours were a blur of panic and determination. As I packed, they alternated between threats and increasingly desperate guilt trips. You're destroying this family, Mom sobbed dramatically, throwing herself across my bed. Your grandmother is going to lose her house because of you. She co-signed loans expecting you to help pay them back. Your uncle's restaurant will close, Dad added, blocking my path to the closet. 20 people will lose their jobs because you're too selfish to help family. 20 families won't be able to feed their children. I never agreed to any of this, I said, shoving clothes into garbage bags. You made promises using my name without asking me. We didn't need to ask, Mom shrieked. You're our son. Everything you are, everything you'll ever be is because of us. That night, as I loaded my car in the darkness, my younger brother Caleb appeared in the driveway. He was 15, and I'd always tried to protect him from our parents' worst behavior, though I was starting to realize I'd failed. Where are you going? He asked, his voice small and scared. I couldn't lie to him anymore. Mom and Dad have been using me for money. They're trying to force me into debt to pay for their mistakes. His face fell, but he didn't look surprised. I know, he whispered. They've been planning the same thing for me. They told me I'm the backup plan if you don't work out. They've already started telling people I'm going to be a lawyer. My heart shattered. They'd turned both their sons into investments to be harvested. They made me apply to expensive summer camps I didn't want to go to, he continued, his voice getting smaller. Said it would look good on my college applications, but then I heard them talking to Aunt Linda about how it would increase my earning potential and help justify bigger loans later. They've been planning this for you too? He nodded miserably. They have a whole timeline. I'm supposed to get into an Ivy League school for law, then work at a big firm and send them money every month. They've already calculated how much I'll make. Come with me, I said desperately. I can't. I'm too young. They'll call the cops and say you kidnapped me. And then what happens to me when they drag me back? I hugged him tight, feeling like I was abandoning him to wolves. I'm going to figure this out, okay? I'm not abandoning you. As I drove away, I saw Dad standing in the doorway screaming after me. You'll be back. You can't survive without us. And when you come crawling back, the terms are going to be a lot worse. A lot worse. Stanford let me move into the dorms early due to my circumstances. The housing director, Mrs. Chen, was incredibly understanding when I explained my situation. We see this more often than you'd think, she said sadly, reviewing my emergency housing application. Parents who see their children as retirement plans rather than individuals. It's a form of abuse that's often overlooked because it's wrapped in language about family obligation. I spent the summer working double shifts at a campus research lab, saving every penny and trying to forget the constant knot of guilt in my stomach. Meanwhile, my parents called constantly, alternating between threats and guilt trips that became increasingly elaborate and desperate. You're destroying this family, Mom would sob into the phone, often with what sounded like other people in the background. Your uncle had to close his restaurant. 23 people lost their jobs. 23 families are suffering because you're too selfish to help the people who raised you. You're going to regret this when we lose the house, Dad would snarl during his calls. When your mother and I are homeless, sleeping in our car, it'll be your fault. How will you feel when we freeze to death because you were too proud to sign a few papers? The guilt was eating me alive, but my lawyer had warned me this would happen. Abusers escalate when their victims escape, he'd explained. They'll try to make you feel responsible for consequences that are actually the result of their own actions. I blocked their numbers and focused on school, but the anxiety was constant. Had I really destroyed my family? Were all these people suffering because of my selfishness? 3 months into my freshman year, I got a call from Caleb that changed everything. They're making me get a job, he said, his voice tight with stress and exhaustion. They want me to give them my paychecks to help with the bills you were supposed to cover. You're 15. That's illegal. They don't care. They're desperate. Dad lost his job last week because he kept missing work to deal with creditors calling. Mom's working 3 jobs, but it's not enough. They say it's my fault for not being ready to contribute yet. What kind of job? Washing dishes at Uncle Ray's new restaurant. Under the table, cash only. They're telling people I'm 16. I work from 4 p.m. to 2 a.m. on weekdays, longer on weekends. I felt sick. You're missing school? They're talking about pulling me out completely. They say education is a luxury we can't afford anymore, and I need to focus on earning money for the family. I realized my escape had only made things worse for my brother. The pressure that had been distributed between us was now crushing him alone. There's something else, Caleb said quietly. They've been meeting with some lawyer about suing you. They think they can prove you owe them money for raising you. That's not how the law works. They don't care. They're desperate, and they're getting crazy. Last night, Dad was talking about selling my college fund to pay bills, and when I asked what would happen to my education, he said I just have to work my way through school like he did. Caleb, this isn't your fault. None of this is your fault. I know, he said, but I could hear the doubt in his voice. But they keep saying if you had just helped like you were supposed to, everything would be fine. That's when I knew I had to do something that still keeps me up at night. I called Child Protective Services. The investigation revealed everything, and much more than I'd expected. The financial abuse, the forged documents, the way they'd groomed both their children to be future income sources, but it went deeper than just our immediate family. They'd even started promising my extended family that I'd support them once I became a doctor, borrowing money against my non-existent future salary from aunts, uncles, and family friends. They'd created an entire web of debt with me at the center, without my knowledge or consent. The CPS worker, Detective Rodriguez, was thorough and compassionate, but the scope of what he uncovered was staggering. Your parents have been running what's essentially a Ponzi scheme using their children as collateral, he explained during one of our interviews. They've borrowed money from family, friends, banks, and even loan sharks by promising future income from both you and your brother. How much money are we talking about? He consulted his notes, flipping through pages of financial records. Nearly $280,000 in total debt, all accumulated with the promise that their children would pay it back. Some of these loans have interest rates over 20%. The worst part was discovering how long this had been going on. They'd taken out their first loan against my future earnings when I was 12 years old, after I'd won a regional science fair. They'd used that victory as proof of my potential to convince a family friend to lend them $5,000 for educational expenses, but the money hadn't gone to my education. It had gone to pay off credit cards they'd maxed out on vacations and luxury purchases. From there, it had snowballed. Each success I'd had in school became evidence they could use to secure larger loans. My SAT scores, my academic awards, my acceptance to Stanford, all of it had been monetized without my knowledge. They'd even taken out loans in anticipation of achievements I hadn't accomplished yet. There was a $15,000 loan taken out when I was 14, secured by promising I'd get into medical school and become a surgeon. Caleb was placed with our Aunt Miranda, Mom's sister, who lived 3 states away. She'd never liked how my parents treated us, and she welcomed him with open arms. I always knew something was wrong, she told me during a phone call after taking custody of Caleb. Your parents were always bragging about how much money you kids were going to make them, like you were racehorses they were training. I tried to talk to your mother about it once, and she got furious, said I was jealous because my kids weren't as talented. The court hearing was brutal and lasted 3 days. My parents' lawyer tried to paint me as an ungrateful son who'd abandoned his family in their time of need. He showed photos of family vacations and Christmas mornings, arguing that my parents had given me a good life and deserved compensation. The defendants invested significantly in their son's education and development, their lawyer argued. They made sacrifices and took financial risks based on his potential. It's not unreasonable for them to expect some return on that investment. But our lawyer was prepared with devastating evidence. She presented the forged documents, recorded phone calls where they discussed their investment strategy regarding their children, and testimony from family members who'd been pressured to lend money based on promises about our future earnings. The most damning evidence was a detailed spreadsheet Dad had created, tracking projected income from both me and Caleb over our entire careers. He'd calculated everything from expected salary progression to retirement contributions, and had borrowed money against those projections going out 40 years into the future. He'd even included calculations for potential inheritance we might provide them, estimating the value of life insurance policies he expected us to carry with them as beneficiaries. Your Honor, our lawyer said, holding up the spreadsheet, the defendants have treated their children not as beloved family members, but as financial instruments. They have systematically exploited their own sons for monetary gain, and they've done so with mathematical precision. The testimony from family members was heartbreaking. Aunt Linda broke down on the stand, explaining how my parents had convinced her to take out a second mortgage on her own home by promising I'd help her pay it back. They said Mitchell was a sure thing, she sobbed. They showed me his grades, his test scores. They said he'd be making $300,000 a year as a doctor and would be happy to help family. I trusted my own sister. Uncle Ray testified about how he'd borrowed $50,000 to expand his restaurant based on their assurances that both Caleb and I would work there and help pay back the business loan. They had it all planned out, he said bitterly. Mitchell would work summers during medical school. Caleb would work part-time during high school and college. They showed me spreadsheets of how much money we'd make together. Even my grandmother, frail and confused at 82, testified about a $20,000 loan she'd co-signed because my parents had convinced her I'd help pay it back. They said it was for the boys' education, she whispered into the microphone. They said Mitchell specifically asked for help with medical school expenses. I'd never asked for any such thing. I'd never even known about the loan. The prosecutor presented evidence that my parents had been running this scheme for years, using each child's achievements to secure larger loans. They'd created fake documentation of conversations with me about repayment plans, forged letters supposedly from me promising to help with family expenses, and had even staged photos of me signing documents I'd never seen. My father got 4 years for identity theft, fraud, and running a financial scheme. My mother received 2 years in probation. But the criminal case was just the beginning. The civil lawsuits from family and friends who'd been deceived lasted for years and devastated what remained of our extended family. Uncle Ray's restaurant failed because the money he'd borrowed to expand it had been based on false promises. Aunt Linda lost her house. Grandma's life savings were wiped out. The ripple effects were enormous. Cousins who'd counted on working at Uncle Ray's restaurant had to find other jobs. Family friends who'd loaned money to my parents lost their retirement savings. 3 different families in our old neighborhood were financially ruined. During the sentencing, my mother looked directly at me with a hatred I'd never seen before. "I hope you're happy," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "You've destroyed everything we worked for. Your whole family is ruined because you were too selfish to help the people who loved you. People are homeless because of you." The judge overheard her. "Ma'am," he said firmly, "you destroyed your family the moment you decided to exploit your children for financial gain. Your son is not responsible for the consequences of your criminal actions. You are." But her words haunted me for months. Had I really caused all this suffering? Were people homeless because I'd refused to sign those papers? My therapist, Dr. Williams, helped me work through the guilt. "You didn't create this situation," she reminded me repeatedly. "Your parents did. Every person who was hurt by their lies and fraud, not by your refusal to participate." That was 4 years ago. I'm now finishing my junior year at Stanford, but I'm majoring in social work instead of pre-med. Turns out I'm more interested in helping kids escape toxic families than I am in becoming a doctor. The decision to change majors wasn't easy. Part of me still felt guilty about not fulfilling the expectations that so many people had. But those expectations had been built on lies and manipulation. "You were never meant to live your life for other people's financial benefit," Dr. Williams told me. "Your worth isn't measured by your earning potential." Caleb is thriving with our aunt. He's getting straight A's, plays varsity soccer, and has never once been asked to hand over his babysitting money to pay family bills. He calls me every Sunday, and we're closer than we've ever been. "I'm thinking about majoring in education," he told me during our last call. "I want to teach middle school kids." "That's great," I said. "What made you choose that?" "I want to help kids like us. Kids whose parents see them as investments instead of people. I want to be the adult who tells them they're worth more than their potential income." My parents were released from prison 8 months ago. They've reached out through mutual friends, claiming they've changed and want to rebuild our relationship. They're living in a trailer park now, both working minimum wage jobs to pay court-ordered restitution. Last month, they sent a letter to my dorm, along with what looked like a business plan printed on cheap paper. "We know we made mistakes," it read, "but family is family. We've learned our lesson. We just need a small loan to get back on our feet. Nothing big, maybe $15,000. We'll pay you back once our new business takes off. We've got a business plan that's guaranteed to work. It's a foolproof system for flipping houses. All we need is startup capital." I showed the letter to my roommate, Trevor, who couldn't believe what he was reading. "They're still trying to use you," he said, shaking his head in amazement. "Even after everything. Even after prison." I threw the letter in the trash, but it bothered me for days. They hadn't learned anything. They were still seeing me as a potential source of money, still trying to rope me into their schemes. Some people never learn. They're still trying to use me, even after everything that happened. They still see me as their retirement plan, just with a different timeline. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Aunt Miranda. "They called here," she said, her voice tight with anger. "They tried to convince Caleb to ask you for money. They told him it was his duty as your brother to help them get back on their feet." "What did he say?" "He hung up on them," she said proudly. "But they called back 6 times. I finally had to block their number. The hardest part isn't the betrayal or the legal battles or even the fact that I'll probably never have a normal relationship with my parents again. The hardest part is wondering how long they'd been planning to use me. Was I ever actually their son, or was I always just a future paycheck they were raising? I think about that 12-year-old kid who won a science fair and felt so proud when his parents bragged about him. I had no idea they were already calculating how to monetize that achievement. I think about all the times they'd pushed me to study harder, to take on more challenging courses, to participate in activities that would look good on college applications. How much of that was genuine concern for my development, and how much was just building my value as an investment? I'll never know for sure when it started, or if there was ever a time when they loved me for who I was rather than what I could provide. But I do know this: I broke the cycle. Caleb will never have to choose between family loyalty and financial survival. And someday, when I'm working with other kids in similar situations, I'll be able to tell them something I wish someone had told me years earlier. You are not responsible for your parents' financial mistakes. You are not an investment. You are not a retirement plan. You are a person, and you deserve better than being treated like a commodity. The saddest part? I think they actually believed they loved us. In their minds, raising children who could support them financially was just good parenting. They couldn't see the difference between loving your kids and exploiting them. It's taken years of therapy to understand that real love doesn't come with payment plans. Now I'm 21, completely financially independent, and working toward a future I chose for myself. I work part-time at a crisis center for teens who've been financially abused by their families. It's more common than people think. Just last week, I counseled a 17-year-old girl whose parents were forcing her to work 50 hours a week at their family business without pay. They called it contributing to the family, but it was just free labor. "I feel so guilty," she told me through tears. "They say I owe them for raising me. They keep a running total of everything they've spent on me since I was born. Food, clothes, medical bills, everything. They say I have to pay it back before I can make my own decisions." "You don't owe anyone for being born," I told her. "Children aren't debts to be repaid. Some families are worth fighting for. Others are worth escaping from. Learning to tell the difference might be the most important lesson I ever learned. My parents still send occasional letters and emails. They've started a blog about family reconciliation and claim they're helping other families heal from financial disputes. According to their website, they're relationship experts who understand the complex dynamics of modern family economics. It's all a scam, of course. They're trying to monetize their own criminal behavior, turning their story into a business opportunity. Even now, even after everything, they can't stop seeing every situation through the lens of potential profit. Their blog posts are disturbing to read. They frame themselves as victims of an ungrateful son who abandoned his family. They talk about the sacrifices they made and how modern children don't understand family obligation. They never mention the fraud, the forged documents, or the prison sentences. I've learned to see those letters and blog posts as reminders of who I never want to become. Every time I'm tempted to take the easy path to see people as resources instead of individuals, I remember what it felt like to be valued only for my earning potential. Last month, Caleb visited me at Stanford. He's 17 now, taller than me, and confident in a way I never was at his age. We spent the weekend hiking and talking about his plans for college. "Do you ever miss them?" he asked as we sat watching the sunset from the top of a hill. "Sometimes," I admitted. "I miss who I thought they were, but those people never really existed. I used to think it was normal," he said quietly. "Parents talking about how much money their kids would make. I thought all families worked that way." "Some do," I said. "But healthy families want their kids to be happy, not profitable." He nodded, then asked the question that still haunts me sometimes. "Do you think they ever really loved us?" I thought about it for a long time before answering. I think they loved the idea of us, the successful, wealthy adults they thought we'd become, but they never loved us as we actually were, just kids who needed guidance and support, not loan guarantees. "I'm glad we got out," he said simply. "Me too." We sat in comfortable silence as the sky darkened. Somewhere out there, our parents were probably still scheming, still looking for their next big score, still convinced that the world owed them something. But here, in this moment, we were free. Free to make our own choices, free to succeed or fail on our own terms, free to love people without expecting financial returns, free to be human beings instead of investment opportunities. And that freedom, I realized, was worth more than any amount of money they could have ever made from us. The most profound lesson I've learned is that true family isn't about blood or obligation or debt. It's about people who love you for who you are, not what you can provide. Aunt Miranda has been more of a parent to Caleb than our biological parents ever were. My chosen family at Stanford, friends, professors, mentors, care about my well-being, not my bank account. Recovery from financial abuse is ongoing. I still sometimes catch myself calculating my worth in monetary terms, still feel guilty when I spend money on things I enjoy rather than saving every penny. But I'm learning that my value as a person isn't tied to my productivity or earning potential. I'm learning what it means to live for myself instead of for other people's expectations. And most importantly, I'm learning that love, real love, never comes with a price tag.